would like to call to order the meeting this evening. Could we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Ms. Kolianos,
Here.
Mr. Bolton,
Here.
Mr. Tunstall,
Here.
Ms. Protermitis,
Here.
Ms. Johnson.
Here.
Do we have any public comments this evening? Would like to speak? The quasi-judicial announcement and swearing in of speakers.
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Heritage Preservation Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the board wishing to disclose any ex parte communications this evening? Seeing none, if there's anyone here who is wishing to speak or testify on behalf of either the applicant, please state, or they are the applicant, please stand and raise your right hand. Any of the applicants wishing to speak this evening, please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
So sworn.
Okay, thank you. First, we're going to have the approval of minutes. If everyone's had the opportunity to look at February 1, 2016 meeting minutes, we had tabled those at the last meeting, and they have come back to us again with some edits. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes of February 1st
So moved as presented.
as presented now? Yes. A second, please?
Second. I'll second.
Thank you. A roll call?
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Protermitis,
Yes.
Mr. Tunstall,
Yes.
Mr. Bolton, Ms. Kolianos,
Yes. 2016.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Thank you. Second, thank you. Roll call?
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Protermitis,
Yes.
Mr. Tunstall,
Yes.
Minutes of April 4th, 2016. Second, roll call, please.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Protermitis,
Yes.
Mr. Tunstall,
Yes.
Mr. Bolton,
Yes.
Move to the May 2nd, 2016 minutes. If everyone's had an opportunity to look at those. I had one suggestion, maybe it's fine the way it is, but we did not approve the reconfiguration of the driveway at this meeting. And I don't know if that should be clarified a little bit in these minutes.
wasn't at that meeting, but, if we didn't approve it, then it appears that we did, just from looking at the vote.
I know, that's
you-
why
oh,
I
is that
was
why you're
wondering if
clarifying?
that should be clarified.
Yeah.
According to the application, it started driveway with brick pavers and replace walkway surface with pavers. And the motion by Mr. Bolton was driveway, replacing driveway with brick pavers and replacing internal walkway with the brick pavers as shown on the survey. But there wasn't, we did not approve the Circle Drive, and that's why it went before the board at that time, the Board of Commissioners. So I don't know if that should be stated a little bit more clearly.
Okay, so,
Yeah, the motion that was approved in the motion that was made and the motion that was approved is reflected in the minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So the clarification, I mean,
What was the motion? Where is it at?
the motion is as listed, so underneath board comments, it said the board to ask the applicant, motion by Mr. Bolton, second vice chair. It says to approve the application for removing existing driveways, so specifically what the motion was for approval of those
Right.
items.
can I
Um,
make a suggestion where they have this up here where it says they asked several questions, is we have the, secretary go back through and actually talk about those questions? Cause I'm thinking about that had to be where that discussion was, and instead of just providing that, actually listing the questions and the discussion that came after that in more of a verbatim manner than we do all the time, just so that hopefully will clarify that, and then we'll bring these back at the next meeting with hopefully the rest of, your minutes up to this point, I'm hoping. Like, you may not have this meeting,
That
but,
would be great, if we could
and we'll do that, we'll just
clarify
list
that
the
a little bit
questions.
more, so that would be good.
Cause I think that will get you, that was when that discussion was had, and I think that will get you closer to that discussion without it affecting the motion itself.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So we're going to table the minutes for, May 2nd, 2016 till the next meeting. The first case that we have before us is, application CA 1692, 2027 Norfolk LLC, 106 West Park Street, fence replacement. And if we could hear about the application.
Yes, Madam Chair. First, we would like to announce that under the staff comments, the item for reviewing of the West Court Street Parking Plan Project, we're removing that this evening. We'll be bringing it back at a later date, so. Okay. Number 1692, the location is 106 West Park Street. The owner and applicant is 2027 Norfolk LLC. Property is located within the WDIA Waterfront Commercial Fishing Development District and within the Commercial General Future Land Use. Property is a contributing structure at Boulevard and West Park Street. The applicant is seeking a certificate of approval for the replacement of a fence on the historic property consisting of an existing two-story structure which was originally utilized as a sponge processing factory and warehouse, and it was formerly known as the E.R. Mears Sponge Pad. Recently come before the HPB for renovation and restoration approval. However, replacement of the fence was not addressed at that time. The applicant, the previous chain link fence on the property. The city's code enforcement division became involved because the replacement fence was not opaque, which is required by the land development code where items are wrapping between the links for opaqueness. In reviewing the application for certificate approval, the board shall considering the following. Proposed alteration or new construction shall be consistent with that of the adjacent contributing structures throughout the immediate neighborhood. Staff's findings for number 1 and number 2, that these two criteria do not apply. Under number 3, the relationship of a structure within a preservation district to the open space between it and other buildings or scenic views shall be protected through a site plan review process. Staff's findings are, the design guidelines for fencing state the following. Given the prominence of fences and walls in the front yard, it is critical that compatibility with the architecture and the structure be achieved. This can be accomplished through the use of architectural styles lend themselves to certain types of fencing. Wood, board-on-board, and picket fences are compatible with the frame, vernacular, bungalow, and colonial revival. Number 1, fencing and walls shall match the style of the building in scale, material, and color. White plastic fences, which emulate wood on board or picket, is an acceptable alternative. Fencing type is not recommended. However, vinyl coated chain link in combination with landscaping can be compatible and applicable. Number 6, landscaping shall enhance the architectural character and appearance of the structure or traditional cultural property and protect those within preservation districts. Staff's findings is that landscaping is being recommended by staff as a condition of approval. Under number 7, rather than replace, wherever possible, an architectural detail shall be treated so as to make the structure or property consistent with the property's original architectural style and character. New materials should replicate the material being replaced in composition, design, color, and texture. Staff's findings. The rich character of the structure on site, but it is permitted in the WDIA district, which was established for the commercial fishing industry. The guide consistency with the structure, but also allow for a vinyl-coated chain link fence with landscaping. However, this would not provide for the opaqueness required by the code. Number 8, all structures shall be recognized as products of their own time and shall not attempt to create an earlier appearance than the original date of construction. Staffing is not expected to reflect an earlier time. Number 9, the renovation of contributing structures in an historic district or designated facilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings. Staff's findings. The Secretary of Interior's standards does not specifically address fencing, except to say that the replacement fencing should reflect the historic period of the structure on site. Number 10, provided that the opaque fencing remains, the project would meet the requirements of the LDC, the WDIA zoning district regulations, comprehensive plan. Number 11, the impact upon archaeological sites or shall preserve the integrity of the site. Staff find recommendations. Staff recommends approval of the applicant's request with one of the following options. 1, the preferred fencing, or 2, removal of the items being stored outside and the allowance of a vinyl-coated chain link fence without the opaque strapping and with landscaping added along Roosevelt and Park Street. Retain the replacement fence with the opaque strapping and add landscaping along Roosevelt and Park Streets. Any questions?
Yes, does the board have any questions or discussion this time?
I do on review criteria and analysis. When you were listing 1, 2, 3, and I might have missed it. There it is. Okay, I see it. Got it. Where it says in, I guess, guidelines 3, walls and fences that create a long continuous span over 50 feet shall contain some form of architectural relief. Does that not apply to this? Is it over 50 feet long?
I think it would be considered over 50 feet.
So would it require some sort of break or something, or do we not address that?
I think that would be difficult in this case, even if we used a board-on-board fence to provide relief. That actually does provide some relief in the visual aspect of it, but I think with visual relief, I think that a lot of times they're referring more to masonry, where it goes back a few feet and then comes up a few feet.
Okay.
Okay, would the applicant like to speak on the behalf of this application? Come forward and give your name, please, and address.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Hausch, address 701 Lanston Court, Tarpon Springs. The only comments I have, and just making myself a bit satisfied, the code enforcement side with the opaque screening, and then we added that we're planning on adding additional landscaping around the front and side and upon the final assessment and kind of the next phase of work to do so. So really just, that was it, and just making myself available if there was any questions.
Oh, I have another staff question.
Okay.
Where in the guidelines does it offer opaque strapping as a?
Your design guidelines, the LDC under the storage section for outdoor storage requires an opaque screened fence for the industrial district if you're going to store things outside. In this particular case, That is not consistent with your guidelines at all. Chain link fence with the vinyl coating may be, but that doesn't get into the discussion of the strapping or the overcoats that they put over top of them, the black overcoat that goes over top of them to screen. None of that is consistent with your design guidelines.
Then I'm confused as to why that's one of the recommendation remedies, is to leave what's there.
Just because there was an existing chain link fence on the property.
Got it.
So we repaired and then just closed it up to make it a usable. Actually, a portion of the chain link fence is still intact along the north side of the property.
Was there any recommendations from staff or the city prior to that repair? Did they like recommend somebody at the city say that's good, go ahead?
No.
The existing fence that was there, the fence that was there prior to that was just a regular chain link fence. And because storage, outside storage is something that is permitted in this district and it is common. So to be able to find something to marry what is actually required by the LDC and try to find something that's aesthetic historically, it's difficult to do that sometimes.
So if I understand,
Additional phases of work, we would do landscaping, we'd probably do it, make sense to do it at one time. So we wanted to kind of make sure we had the blessing to leave as is, and if there had to be a change or an altercation. So if we can leave intact, probably later this year, first of the year, we'll start kind of another round of renovations and whatnot and address all the landscaping. But the plan would be, like previously stated, to do something that's indigenous of it and whatnot, some sort of shrubbery, and probably there's some existing palm trees that are there to make those kind of the accent points to break it up, and then fill it in with some
Like the building, I don't know if you're familiar with it, at the end of Gross and the end of Gross where it runs into Live Oak, the front of the roofing company there, that type of landscaping with the palms and the shrubbery to that caliber and that scale and that quality.
at the roofing company, you're saying?
Yes.
Yes.
So it'll be that quality.
Yeah.
And my concern is with landscaping, it becomes difficult for us to make sure that it stays that way.
Sure.
And
I mean, you could use that case as an example that whatever we're gonna put, we're gonna take care of it, maintain it, make it look nice.
have anyone in the audience who would like to speak in a favor and support of this application? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition of the application?
Can I make
Mhm.
a comment? First of all, congratulations on that property. I think we're really lucky that we have who got in there, and they're actually going through the effort to keep it functional. This historic property that probably could have qualified to have been torn down if anybody had taken that route. There was a chain link fence there before. The building is actually metal, which I drive past it multiple times every day, and I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw who was going in there, and that we would actually have somebody taking care of the property and retaining what's there. Is it possible to go ahead and make a motion to approve it?
Yes, you can.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the fence, and option number 3 with the landscaping would be my recommendation.
Do I hear a second?
second,
Second roll call, please.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Proter-Midas,
Yes.
Mr. Tunstall,
Yes.
Mr. Bolton,
yes.
Ms. Kolianos.
Yes. Thank you. Now we will move on to application CA 16-93. Les Carroll, 5-3 West Park Street, construction of a new driveway.
Okay, this property is a non-contributing historic property consisting of an existing single-story structure constructed in 1910 in the masonry vernacular style. There is a full-width porch, front porch, which appears to have been screened at some time, with a centralized entry. The exterior of the home is stucco. The roof is a hip-style roof cladded with The roof is a hip-style roof cladded with composite shingles. The home has been extensively altered with window replacements and stucco added to the exterior. There is no driveway for this home, so the construction of a new driveway. There have been code violations assessed against the applicant by the city's code enforcement department due to the applicant's parking on the front lawn. Number 1, the height and width of any proposed alteration or new construction shall be consistent with that of adjacent contributing structures throughout the immediate neighborhood. Staff's findings are that the requested driveway is consistent with the driveways of the neighboring property. Number 2, the width and height of the windows applicable. Number 3, the relationship of a structure within a preservation district to open space between it and other buildings or scenic views shall be protected through staff findings. The new driveway request is far better than parking on the front lawn of a property, which would also detract from the neighboring properties. Mass of the building after alteration shall be reflective of the building's original architectural style. Staff's findings: the dimensions of the proposed driveway are consistent with what is permitted by the city's land development code. Number 6, landscaping shall nurture or the traditional cultural property and protect open spaces and pedestrian ways within preservation districts. Staff's findings: additional landscaping is not being proposed by whenever possible. Architectural details shall be treated as to make the structure or property consistent with the property's original architectural style and character. New materials should replicate the material being replaced in composition, design, color, and texture. Staff's findings are that the new driveway will replicate what is in the surrounding area. Number 8, all structures shall be recognized as products of their own time and shall not attempt to create. Staff's findings are that the proposed driveway will not reflect an earlier time. Number 9, the renovation of contributing structures in the historic district or designated for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic structures. Staff's findings: Secretary of Interior standards prefer a side driveway. There is no rear alley access and no garage is present on the site, and the subject property is only 50 feet wide, leaving no other option than constructing a new driveway forward of the existing house. In addition, this is not considered a contributing structure. Number 10, the proposed with applicable goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff's findings are that the planned driveway would meet the requirements of the regulations and the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. Number 11, the impact upon archaeological sites shall preserve the integrity of the sites will be impacted. Recommendations are that the staff recommends approval of the applicant's new driveway request. Any questions?
I have several questions. They're under code violation for parking on the front lawn.
That's correct.
What is the guideline or the statute that requires or enables there to be a code violation?
That actually, I do not know the answer to that question.
So we don't know why they're receiving violations.
Only because they are parking, so our
Preference isn't for homes to be, historic homes not to have cars parked right in front, most likely. Okay, second question. Properties that having a driveway, this would be similar to them, or I think you said that it would be consistent with neighboring properties. Are there pictures of those neighboring properties in our packet?
yes, I provided them in the staff
I
report.
didn't see them.
File, Florida Master File for it.
Did y'all have pictures of neighboring properties? I might have missed them.
Okay,
Sure, to the side of the house.
to the front of the house. And what the applicants propose for, on the neighboring properties?
Okay. And then, I guess my other question would be for the applicant. And then, in the residential buildings having vehicular access from the street or through alleys, these development patterns should be preserved and reinforced through the design guidelines of the city land development regulations. And then you also stated that it is the Secretary of Interior standards to prefer a side driveway leading to the front-loaded garage in the rear of the lot.
That is correct. There's only 50 feet in width on this property.
Right.
So in a lot of places that would even be considered non-conforming. Also, you have to keep in mind that the standards for the Secretary of Interior's standards and rehabilitation guidelines are for contributing structures, and the structure and property, the structure is not a contributing structure. So I was trying to require to do, I think they're basically doing what is consistent with the neighboring properties.
Okay, thank you for answering those.
Would the applicant like to speak, on behalf of the application?
Sir, were you here when we swore in all the speakers?
Sorry?
Were you here when we swore in all the speakers?
No.
Would you please raise your right hand for me?
Yes.
Do you swear or affirm that testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
But I just wanted to be here to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a question about the entry to the driveway, prior to the sidewalk coming off the street. What's your plan for the blocks that are, recessed into the street and the actual space that it doesn't really show about a 6 foot by whatever the width is, 20 foot,
Right.
and removing the blocks?
Yes. Well, they would be necessary to be removed, yes. I don't know if they needed to be retained, but that would be possible.
Move the curb, or, I'm just wondering, because there's a curb,
We're going to have an apron down to the road,
okay, and the driveway will start here and go all the way up
to
to
the house, yes.
to the
So
house.
to clear the to clear the sidewalk, basically.
Mm-hmm.
A question.
15 months ago.
Did you receive any information or disclosure that it was in a historic area and may be view?
No, we were told that it was not.
That's unfortunate.
It was in the historic area, but not a contributing property.
Got it.
That's what we were
Thank you.
told.
Are there any other questions from the board? Thank you. Anyone in the audience who would like to speak in support of this application? In opposition of the application? Thank you. Does the board have any other questions? Do I hear a motion about the application?
I will make a motion that we accept the application for the construction of a new driveway.
A second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Johnson? Ms. Protomitis?
Yes.
Mr. Tunstall?
Yes.
Mr. Bolton?
Yes.
Ms. Kolianis?
Yes. Thank you. Next, we will move on to, the next application, which is CA 1691, Mary Elizabeth Howard, 427 East Tarpon Avenue, Casa Azul, B&B exterior renovations.
Okay, the owner and applicant is Mary Elizabeth Howard. Structure is considered a certificate of approval to allow for the renovation of the historic structure consisting of 2 stories and constructed circa 1910 in the craftsman's bungalow style. There is a full-width front and side porch, the corner of which was partially screened circa 1930. There is a centralized French door under the main porch roof. The exterior of the home is stucco and aluminum siding, which was added over the existing wood siding on some parts of the house circa 1970. The roof is a steep-pitched, hip-style roof with wide eaves and exposed rafter tails, and is cladded with metal tiles. Pebblestone pier columns support the roof. A driveway and parking spaces span the adjacent lot, which is also owned by the applicant and is paved with a rear access alley behind the home. The applicant is reconstructing the structure to open a new bed and breakfast inn. In addition to the complete renovation of the interior of the structure, the following renovations reconstruct RA facade improvement grant with the for the replacement of all the windows in the structure. The applicant is proposing to utilize white vinyl, single various sizes, but all the same model. Through staff's research, it seems generally acceptable to utilize single-hung windows on those walls and stories not visible from a frontage street. It was only on a new craftsman homes and those built in the Southwest in the Prairie Bungalow style that single standard window pane configuration for an historic craftsman home is the 3, 4, 6, or 9/1 pane configuration. It proposes to replace the front porch and front garden walk with pewter brick pavers. New alley access, stabilization, and partial interior drive connection. Access point into the rear of the property, and the parking area will be restriped and include a new accessible parking stall. Landscaping, including vegetation on site, no tree removal is proposed, and potential sodding of the back lawn, and a few Florida-friendly plants added near the proposed on the front lawn. Fencing. The applicant proposes to install a new 6-foot pine board-on-board pressure-treated fence along the perimeter sign, a new lighted blue and white 18-square-foot freestanding sign consisting of metal and plastic will be added to the front lawn, not requiring approval by the board, consisting of refinishing of doors in their original state, a new fire exit for the second floor located at the repair and finishing of the existing deck, and restriping of the existing paved parking areas. For the review criteria and analysis, under number 1, the height and width of any proposed alteration or new construction shall be consistent with that of the adjacent contributing structures throughout the immediate neighborhood. Staff's findings are that most of the homes on this portion of Tarpon Avenue consist of homes with different architectural styles. Therefore, any alterations to the subject property, particularly the windows, should reflect and be consistent with the original craftsman style for the period in which it was constructed. Number 2, the width and height of windows and entries shall be consistent with the character of the building's original architectural style, substantiated by historic, physical, or pictorial evidence. Staff's findings. It is possible that the existing single-hung 1/1 pane windows that currently exist within the structure were also windows that were replaced at a later time. Based on the few craftsman homes on this portion of East Tarpon Avenue, the predominant window pane configurations are the 3/1 and 6/1 styles. Staff finds that the other proposed improvements for landscaping, fencing, the new sign, the porch and walk pavers, and the new alley access are all improvements that will enhance the proposed use, structure. Under number 3, the relationship of the structure within a preservation district to the open space between it and other buildings or scenic views shall be protected through the site plan review process. All of the improvements proposed have been reviewed through the city's technical review committee and through the conceptual site plan review process to ensure compliance with the city's land development code. Number 4, the shape and texture of the roof shall replicate the shape, texture, and type of roof on the structures of similar style and age within the preservation district. We did not find this one applicable. Number 5, the size and mass of the building after alteration shall be reflective of the building's original architectural style. Staff's findings, the size and massing of the structure will not be affected. Architectural elements of the neighborhood and neighboring properties have been reviewed and considered by staff. Number 6, or traditional cultural property, and protect open spaces and pedestrian ways within the preservation district. Staff's findings. The proposed landscaping and pavers will enhance the appearance of the structure and the pedestrian walks on the property. Number 7, distinctive architectural features shall be repaired rather than so as to make the structure or property consistent with the property's original architectural style and character. New materials should replicate the material being replaced in composition, design, planning for the restoration of most of the historical elements on site. The proposed sign lighting will need to be taken into consideration to ensure that there is no bleed over or over. Number 6, all structures shall be recognized as products of their own time and shall not attempt to create an earlier appearance than the original date of additional modifications and alterations are not expected to create an earlier appearance. However, the addition of 1/1 single hung window design guidelines. Number 9, the renovation of contributing structures in an historic district or designated cultural property shall meet the limitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historical buildings. Staff's findings are, the local design guidelines recommend the 4/1 or 3 project shall conform to the requirements of the Land Development Code and be in compliance with the applicable goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff's findings are that all of the proposed improvements would meet the requirements of the LDC, the zoning district regulations, and the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. The impact upon archaeological sites shall preserve the integrity of the site. And staff's findings are that no archaeological certificate of approval request for the proposed improvements with the following recommendations. 1, replacement windows for the front and sides of the structure should be 3/1 pane style, since these walls are visible from Tarpon Avenue, and the B&B use of the structure is not only a commercial use of the structure, but a use that emphasizes the historical nature of the structure. The 3/1 pane style would be consistent with the same craftsman style home located across the street. Number 2, sign lighting may require shielding from light overflow or glare, depending on what type is used. Staff recommends ground lighting for uplighting of the sign instead. Any questions?
Does the board have any questions for this application? I have a question. The fence, it said something about it would be around the perimeter of the property by, you mean from the back? I mean, I'm trying to get an idea of where that fence is going to go.
The applicant was instructed that by code, and especially within this, this zoning district, it's within one of the T zones, the transact zones that fall under the special area plan. It requires that the fence cannot come forward, anything forward of 15 feet from the front property line, has to be 4 feet or less. So as long as they go back by 4 feet, they can have a taller fence of 6 feet and possibly even 8 feet if it's considered a commercial use. But that's something that we wouldn't recommend. We'd recommend a 6-foot max fence on that.
So it's not in the front of the house, it's to the side and the back of the house.
Correct. It would have to be a minimum of 15 feet back from the front property line before they can have anything taller than 4 feet.
I also had a question about the sign, which you're recommending under, the ground lighting. The size of the sign, from what I understand from looking at this, it's 6.5 feet long and 3 feet high.
It does, actually, it meets the code.
It does meet the code.
It does fall
That's my
within the square
question.
footage allowed for the sign, for the use.
Okay, all right. Would the applicant like to speak in favor of the application?
Sir, can I ask you to raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you swear affirm that testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Is 2674 Walnut Drive, Palm Harbor. In addition to what Lisa explained here, give more authenticity to the historical value of the edifice. The owner has agreed to remove and exposing then the cedar siding that was done originally, and repair and resolve and be behind the aluminum. And I think that historically, that as an architect, I believe that has more value, historical value of the building. The landscaping, for example, also I am a LEED certified architect too, and in the landscaping, the little addition that we do above and beyond trimming and cutting and species, so we do not require extra watering or unusual conditions to the climate where we are. Those are the only two things that at this moment I would like to add to what has been said.
The board have any questions of the applicant?
Thank you. for your investment in the city and thank the people taking a chance on Tarpon Springs and the potential that we have and are arriving to at this season right now.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure the owners appreciate they are sitting here. So thank you for your words.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm
Just-
sorry.
That's okay. Just about the windows, how did you originally decide on is it the single hung that you had proposed in here to replace the windows with, and then that seems to be a little bit of an issue?
I like that question very much, and I would like to, something that I have not seen in the HPV reviews that I, again, as a lead architect, the windows and the door replacement also obey an energy consideration. To replace single, the decisions had to be made thinking with a better load or a lower load of cooling by having a double pane from the outside of the same window. So that consideration is not, let's say, historical in the terms of modern times. I think that item, and I'll mention another point on that respect. So to answer your question, it will be the windows that goes with the neighborhood, the 3-on-1 that Lisa has mentioned, or the 3-over-1, and so that we were trying to find that window that had the double pane and the closest look to the double hung that was 3-over-1. Also with energy and with this building, crawl space, and the crawl space also behaves as an exterior wall, meaning that would be required an R19. And when I looked underneath that building, never anything was done underneath. So I am proposing, and they are approving, an R19 of a rigid insulation plus fibered insulation, and then close it. So the loads, again, on the cooling will be a lot less between the windows and this horizontal wall.
Say that again, the code would be what?
R19, on the demands for cooling, as we treat the floor that gives or that connects with the crawl space underneath and nothing else. So down there on a day like a month ago, it was 140 degrees. Now we're asking inside for 75, 40 to 74. Instead, if we have insulation underneath, treating that like an exterior wall, which energy-wise it is, then we have less demand of the cooling in the building. Plus also, I have suggested, and we are doing it, the initial building had the air handler up in the attic, which is also an insane thing to do, and also had the air handlers underneath the crawl space. Those two areas a month ago were easily 100. Now inside we're asking for 74. Solution, inside the building on the second floor, we have a space for the air handler now in a temperature, say on an ambience of say 80, 75, not 140, space inside the building, plus the cooling between the floor and the crawl space. Conclusion, we not only have a historically elegant and respected building, but also in terms of today's standards, a very well insulated and excellent in terms of energy consumption for cooling loads.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, you're not going with the city's recommendation on the front of the building for the 3-over-1s? Or is your plan to follow that recommendation, or to go with
We have planned to follow the recommendation for the 3-on-1s, over ones.
on the front?
Correct.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you, sir. Do I hear anyone that would like to speak in favor of this application? Anyone else in the audience? In opposition? All right, do I hear a motion from the board? Oh,
Madam Chair, if I may add, as far as what the applicants are proposing with the siding, Staff did not find out about that until this morning.
Okay.
So as far, that's not something that was covered, any recommendation for you on that. Don't know if you're able to make a recommendation for them now on that, or if you want to consider that, or if you want them to come back.
All right, it's my understanding what he's saying, they're taking off some type of aluminum siding, to expose the original siding.
It's a cedar shake.
Cedar
Cider, I believe
shake.
it is, yeah.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board on that respect?
I'm not familiar with that part of the, I mean, I've seen the building quite a few times, beautiful. Is that on the front, on Tarpon Avenue? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, I don't know. If you wanna yell. I don't know.
The CDOT sidings that is there is about 1 foot wide planks, and yes, they're in the front in a limited amount because the big windows and the doors cover most of the front, and it goes on the side. And that aluminum is not an aluminum in the form of, let's say, siding like planks. It is just sheets of aluminum. It was changing to aluminum for some reason, but so the idea is to now bring those planks exposed.
We could add that to the, the recommendations or our approval of that if the board feels that would be good.
I think that's, he was proposing that they would remove it and then restore what was originally there, bring
Right.
it to back to its original. I think that's very good to add.
Do I hear, a motion?
So I'd move to approve the application as presented by staff with the addition that there's an approval for the removal of aluminum siding and restoration of cedar shake siding. Period. Question, is there some trigger point with the deterioration of siding that the material changes that we have to approve that, or do they have carte blanche on? It sounds like, intent is to do an incredible job of restoration, but do we,
The removal is not an issue, but I think until they remove it and actually see the quality, or the quality of what's actually underneath, they're probably not gonna know the answer to that question. If it's gonna be something that they're gonna have to come back, they may have to come back, if they're gonna have to do some type of large change, if they're changing individual, individual boards out, that's a different story. That's something that staff, we can work with them on. Obviously, we want them to try to, whatever they're gonna replicate, to replicate it as closely as possible. But again, until they get off whatever's on, whatever metal or whatever's on there, to really get an idea of the whole structure, what it's gonna be like, they're not gonna be able to really know that's the case. But obviously, we'll work with them as much as possible when they're in that process to just make them aware if they do need to do some kind of holistic change, if it's one side or one area, to come back and see you guys if that's necessary. But hopefully they'll be able to do, replace what needs to be replaced, and it will on a piecemeal basis, and retain that original, as much of that original as possible. But that would be generally how we would handle it. Cause they're not gonna know right now, it's too early.
So we've heard the motion. Do we have a second for the motion?
I'll second the motion, just as Michael stated it.
Oh, please.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Protomitis,
Yes.
Mr. Tunstall,
Yes.
Mr. Bolton,
yes.
Ms. Colianos,
Yes. Thank you. Now we move on to, the next application, which is CA 16 Joe Albino for Harold Johnson. Now let me see if I can read this a little better. Kerr Irrevocable Trust, 121 East Tarpon Avenue, the Cliché Lounge, window replacement.
Okay, this case is an after-the-fact application. The property is considered a contributing historic structure, and the applicant is seeking a certificate of approval for the windows that were replaced on the first and second floors of the historic structure, constructed circa 1894 in the masonry vernacular style. The structural system and exterior of the structure consist of two narrow wood doors that have been reconditioned and stained. An awning covers the sidewalk for the entire width of the structure. The brick facade was painted and hardboard was applied to the structure circa 1990. There is a corbelled brick plaque with the words G.W. Fernald, 1894, is centered in the parapet. This was the first commercial building constructed after a fire district on the site. The new store was located on the first floor and stocked hay, cattle, and horse feed, and household goods and groceries. The second floor was a community meeting space. The original second-story windows were wood, double-hung, 1/1 arched panes with arched hoods over the windows. The new windows installed on the second story of the structure consist of arched 1/2-inch high-impact mirrored single panes with vinyl casings. The applicant received approval from the technical review committee for the first and second story mirrored glass panels on August 28th of 2016. The applicant installed the new windows without going through the HPB review process, triggering action by the city's code enforcement division. At this time, only the windows are being reviewed by this board for the certificate of approval. The height and width of the proposed alteration or new construction shall be consistent with that of the adjacent contributing structures throughout the immediate neighborhood. Staff's findings is the replacement window. Number 2, the width and height of the windows and entries shall be consistent with the character of the building's original architectural style. Repair or replacement of missing architectural features should be based on accurate duplications substantiated by historic, physical, or pictorial evidence. Staff's findings. So the mirrored single-pane windows would not be considered consistent with the original windows. However, other architectural features have been retained, arch hoods, and the wooden blind stops and sills. The original first story windows were also single-pane windows, but they were not mirrored. Unfortunately, the casings of the first story windows were completely dry rotted and termite damaged. These casings were not able within a preservation district to the open space between it and other buildings or scenic views shall be protected through the site plan review process for the neighboring structures. The structures and windows on the same block are obviously varied in style and can be considered eclectic. And in the uses that also several frontages with varying degrees of mirror glazing. Staff is of the opinion that the replacement windows, although more tinted than the original windows, serve the use of a nightclub. Since alcohol will be served on both floors of the building, the second-story single-pane windows versus a single hung window for the use and for the public. Number 4, we did not find applicable. Number 5, the size and mass of the building after alteration shall be reflective of the building's original architectural style. Staff's finding then remains the same. The number and size of the windows were not increased or decreased. Number 6, landscaping shall enhance the architectural character and appearance of the structural or traditional cultural property and protect open spaces and pedestrian ways within preservation districts. Staff's findings, the structure serves the main street and sits on the built-to line. Landscaping is not expected or required for this property. Number 7, distinctive architectural features shall be repaired rather than replaced wherever possible, and architectural details shall be treated as consistent with the property's original architectural style and character. New materials should replicate the material being replaced in composition, design, color, and texture. Staff's findings are damage to the wood muntins and casings on several of the windows. In accordance with the design guidelines, the replacement of all the windows is permitted. Shall be recognized as products of their own time and shall not attempt to create an earlier appearance than the original date of construction. Staff's findings. Unfortunately, this structure was already altered extensively in the past. The brick facade was painted in the past, and the applicant proposes to repaint the brick, which is not reviewed by this board, in a lighter, more neutral tone. Number 9, The renovation of contributing structures in a historic district shall meet the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings. Staff's findings are that the Secretary of Interior standards allow for the replacement of compatible windows when the original materials are not technically or economically feasible. There was a lot of termite damage to the wood casings and finding arched windows to fit the dimensions of the existing window openings was difficult. Number 10, proposed project shall conform to the requirements of this code and be in compliance with applicable goals, objectives, and policies of the windows do meet the requirements of the LDC, the zoning district regulations, and the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. Number 11, the site. And there were no archaeological sites that were going to be impacted. Recommendations, staff recommends approval of the applicant's window replacement request. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
This is an after the fact.
Okay, and is it for second floor, second story as well as first?
Correct.
So they've all been replaced? Okay. The first floor is the lounge, correct? The business
Actually,
itself?
both floors will be serving alcohol.
Okay, is the second floor currently in use, or it will be open for use?
I think actually the applicant will probably answer the question for you.
Okay.
Easier, what he's proposing.
Question. So, just to help me understand, we're here today because the applicant came to the city to get instructions on what to do, or they just did it?
Discovered that the windows were incorrectly changed out without approval by this board. They then were cited by code enforcement to come to you and have you guys determine whether or not you feel that the replacement windows that they have put in are worthy to applicant do something else. So that's what we're here for today.
So I just misheard or misread. It sounded like they had
approval through the technical review
approval.
committee.
They had approval, but when we review technical review, on that technical review board, approval was actually for a CRA grant. They got approval for their CRA grant, which goes through the TRC. Part of the requirements are when they're in the historic district, it's in a historic building, especially when it's a contributing structure, that they are to come before this board prior to starting construction.
Okay.
Because they need to get approval for those CRA grants ahead of when they actually start the stuff so that we know what their itemized list of things that they're going to do, so that when we go back and do the reimbursement, we have something to go against. So that's why it goes to TRC first. Then they're supposed to come to this board with any changes to a contributing structure that require your approval. And
Okay.
in this case, the windows definitely would have required your approval.
It's the way I was reading it. They had,
Yeah,
like,
it's-
we're given advice.
Would the applicant like to speak yes, thank you.
And can I also ask one more question? Is page 2, the photo on the bottom of page 2, it says,
That's old.
that's old.
It's
So
old, it's in there so that you can see what the windows looked like prior to what they look like. And we had to go to try to find a couple of good photos for you to understand.
What are we saying they look like now? Do we have a visual of
I have
that?
a
Yeah,
picture.
it's
That's
the next,
okay.
the next,
Thank
very
you.
next page.
Is that
But
better
you said the bottom ones were replaced as well, so the photo is just showing the top replacement?
That's correct.
Okay.
But it's, again, a single sheet glass.
I have a question of the attorney. Is safety a concern that that's in the purview of this board? Thank you.
No. I'm trying to see, is there actually
That's the
some
cable.
type of,
It's a reflection of the cable, the electrical cables
There's an
from the
electrical
building.
line there.
It's a
Because when you
reflection.
drive down, you see it. It looks like it's perfect, but it's
Right.
really an optical illusion.
Okay,
And those are my VIP rooms. That's a martini lounge that we're placing up on the second floor. And those are actually martini, VIP rooms that are gonna be privately with a code for the clients to enjoy themselves in a private session, but my biggest concern was those are high impact windows that we placed on those windows, because we don't want nobody to gain access and open up the window and toss stuff out the window, so we put high impact, just in case if anything ever occurred in that room.
It's hard to tell with these photos what the bottom. So the bottom was, the arch was taken away completely, is that correct? No.
No.
On the left side, you have the arched windows. On the right, it's the big squared or rectangular. Okay. And the second floor, I think I was asking earlier, what is the second floor used for?
Those windows are, those rooms are VIP rooms. Basically, you lease them out to entertain your guests. The upstairs is gonna be a martini lounge, piano bar, martini lounge.
Okay.
And then the downstairs is gonna be a nightclub.
Do we have any other questions for the applicant?
Thank you for your investment in downtown. Sorry you had this hiccup.
Oh, it's okay. It's a beautiful town.
Motion for this application?
Will there be discussion after the motion, or discussion,
We can do discussion right now.
close public comment first? or-
I should, yes, definitely.
That's okay.
I probably should ask, if there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak in favor or in opposition of this application. More discussion?
I'd like
You
to,
and I?
just for discussion, just in review of the of what's been presented to us, as an after-the-fact applicant, safety off of the board, because that's not in the purview of this board, so a person's safety on the second floor isn't, something we can, in making a decision. I don't see how we would have ever approved the types of windows that were installed to replace what was there. Even if they were rotted, we would still have asked for something and have consistently in our guidelines dictate that we should ask for similar style windows. Also, the guidelines state, in fact, it has its own number, of all the different guidelines, and number 5 is original and or new windows shall not be highly tinted, period, as its own thing. So,
They're no longer tinted. It's shade. There's a shade behind it that makes it look like they're actually.
yeah, I think we're just having comments now.
I do
so we're-
apologize.
yeah.
I stepped.
So those are my concerns, that I don't see how this would have ever been approved in the way that it was done, and lack of diligence on the city's part as far as them getting, guidance to do this before they did it. And its structure in our city.
Older.
Yeah, and I
Right.
don't, those are my concerns.
Right. Do we have any other discussion? It kind of puts us in a very uncomfortable spot, to be honest with you. So the only thing I can do now is ask if there is a motion from the city's recommendation, or if we have another type of recommendation that we would like to make for approval.
I would make a motion that we deny the city's recommendation and request that the applicant come into compliance with our historical guidelines.
Do I hear a second for that app?
I second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Protomitis,
Yes.
Mr. Tunstall,
Yes.
Mr. Bolton,
Yes.
Ms. Kolianis.
Yes. So that completes our applications for this evening, the cases. We now will go to staff comments.
Well, as we mentioned before, we're not gonna hear the one application that's gonna come back to you. Well, it's not really an application, it's just for informational purpose. We'll bring it back to you once, it's been updated. There's a couple updates that are gonna go forward with that. Other than that, staff does not have any direct comments at this point. We only have one application for your next meeting, so you will have a meeting in November. Right now, we currently have one application, so it won't be quite as extensive, I think, as tonight's applications were.
Do we have board comments?
On our, can I refer a previous application? If the board member's in a very precarious position, that the staff recommendation would be to approve with, in my opinion, limited reasoning, and then put it on us to be the bad guys. I felt that that's the way it was treated. That's how I felt.
Well, staff is only able to make a recommendation or provide options. We're not able, we don't make the final determination. Responsibility to review everything like you have and to make that decision.
You can understand how a recommendation from you, looks to the applicant, then it looks like we're being but I don't care what it looks like.
I have to look at it from the zone aspect and from the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
And we do have a lot of new uses coming in, into the area within the historic district. These uses from residential to commercial. And a lot of these new businesses that are coming in are a big economic, that economic development at the same time, try to keep our historical.
I will, in response to that, for guidelines, so that we could better serve the business owners and residents of this community. And for instance, the bed and breakfast, what happens to the board? Again, our guidelines don't even, mention Hardy Board. So I just think it again exposes this board that if all these changes are coming, and I don't know, we haven't gotten an update from the city about our review of our guidelines. So it would be great if somebody would give us a report or let us know how that's coming along.
I did have the opportunity, and many times what's easiest to do is to present different codes from other cities that and compatible, instead of starting it from the very ground floor, because that ends up taking a lot longer to be able to do it. For instance, and send some to you from time to time, and you all take a look at them and see, maybe even go through a discussion, have a meeting, go through with our area with a couple of tweaks.
That makes sense to me. I mean, there's no point in reinventing the wheel if we work off of, and it would be a quicker, more efficient process.
And there may be some more communities that you all are more familiar with or more comfortable with that you would like to reference. Okay, I come from a lot of different areas. I come from Northeast and out in Texas, and the historical content and the look of historical structures is different everywhere you go. So I think it's something that y'all are gonna have to take from another city or another community and make it your own. You're gonna have to tweak it to make it your own.
Do it and move forward on it. And, I mean, it's gonna be some extensive work, no doubt. But to hire someone from the outside that comes in and actually does it,
Can I just make a comment from a legal perspective? While I appreciate that y'all are trying to move forward with your guidelines, and I think that would likely be important for this board, your standards of review do not reference your guide. You're talking about if someone comes before this board and they want to use some sort of material that's not referenced in your guidelines, the purview of this board of review that are set forth in the code to make that determination. Your guidelines, while helpful, are just that. They're guidelines. They're not a requirement for you to meet every single one of those. You are required to meet the standards for review that are within your code. Not one of those items, and staff lists them in every single application that comes before this board, not one of those items says that you have to adhere to the historic guidelines that you have for this board. That is just a very helpful tool. while understanding that it would be more helpful if it was up to date. That is not a requirement for you guys to go outside of those and make the recommendations based on what the standards of review for your criteria for this board are. So that may give a little bit more flexibility, while I understand where you're coming from as far as, what the code says. You have a little bit more flexibility than adhering specifically to those guidelines.
Any other discussion from the board? Then I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Thanks for putting up all my questions. Thanks for putting up all my questions. Just kind of learn. I get called that all the time. I get that all the time. Either are you related? I almost made a comment, but I know. Are you related to Michael or no?
You get that?
Oh, I still get it. But you know what? It's I definitely know how old somebody is.
Thank you.
Because it's definitely not anybody from, you know.
I can appreciate
Thank you.
both of you. And if I get a sore throat, I won't.
Away.
You're coming
I
at
like
us,
sitting here with my name tag in front of me.
coming at us with hypodermic needles.
So when I came on the board, they give me this, and the statement they used was, "This is your Bible." That's the comment that was used to me.
Yeah.